What I remember about the community is the fact that everything was there. Any place you want to go, barbershops, as we called them at that time, beauty parlors. Any store, there was a little 5 and 10 cent store.
I think the social side, to know who your funeral directors and the ministers and the hairdressers and the college professors and the firms that flourished here, to have folks know who they could look up to and to know that they could have a thriving business.
This notion of a community coming together to build itself and center those activities in Jackson Ward against a city that excluded them from those very institutions. So you weren't allowed to shop in a department store. You weren't allowed to do the kind of banking that you'd like to do. And so this creation of a separate, really a separate society.
It's important for folks to understand how this was like a city within a city, and how folks survived and thrived despite segregation.
One of the early areas in Jackson Ward that's particularly interesting, I think, is there was a concentration of Richmond's early free black population. So these were individuals who had either purchased their way out of slavery or had never been slaves. And Richmond had a fairly significant population of free blacks before the Civil War. And that particular population was concentrated in sections of Jackson Ward.
This area was known throughout the United States as a place to come for blacks to stay, where they could go to black restaurants, see entertainers. Many times in the South, when blacks would come to entertain somewhere, or people would come to visit, they didn't know what restaurants you could go to where it would be white only, or they would feel uncomfortable. So here in Richmond, to have Jackson Ward, to have the theaters and shows right here, and restaurants that blacks could go to freely without worrying about was it a good place to go. It was well known throughout the United States. Well, Richmond was home to the first black-owned bank in the whole United States, and that was called the Bank of True Reformers, and it was founded in 1888. So that's one first that happened here. A second first with banking is Maggie Lena Walker founded her bank here in 1903, thus becoming the nation's first female bank president. She was African American.
The bank that she established was originally called St. Luke Penny Savings Bank, and then St. Luke Bank and Trust, and eventually was called Consolidated Bank and Trust. And that bank, Consolidated, survived as an independent, black-owned bank for over 100 years, serving the community of Jackson Ward. You had people who at one time could easily cross where the interstate eventually was. You could usually just walk down the street to get to Consolidated Bank. But with the highway coming through, you didn't have that easy access anymore. So it does split the community into two parts.
That's another piece of the Jackson Ward story that reflects so much of what happened in Richmond and the unintended consequences, or maybe intended consequences, of transportation decisions. And so this route that would accommodate this new technology, the car, call for a route that would go right through the center of the city to connect all the component parts. Well, it's very interesting that it picks Jackson Ward to go right through the middle of. And so what happens with the construction of 95 was that 10% of Richmond's African American population lost their houses.
An interstate that gets people back and forth is the only reason that the city was divided. I think that one of the most important things about Jackson Ward is that it has gone through its ups and its downs. You know, I know a little bit of the history of Jackson Ward, and you know, to know that this used to be the Harlem of the South. Very educated, well-to-do blacks ran this part of the city.
It is known for the black entertainers that came through here. You had many famous entertainers come through here, as well as a native from here, Bilbo Jangles Robinson, the native tap dancer. He was from Richmond, Virginia.
You go on the Hippodrome and you get to see some of the original pieces that some of the musicians and the artists, actually played on. You know, we're trying to build Jackson Ward back up. There's a lot of properties around here, so a lot of the apartments are being utilized now where they were vacant buildings. People are turning those into residential housing. You know, restaurants are coming down here.
Oh, I think it's on the upswing. I think that more folks are interested in what the area is about. I think that you see a lot of preservation around here. The Black History Museum is here. I think the change is for the good. Definitely an upswing.
I think it's always had this great, strong neighborhood association that's been the core of what makes that neighborhood work. And you know, it's always been a fragile neighborhood because it was so destabilized by the 50s and 60s and by integration and all the other things that we've talked about. But at the core has always been this very strong neighborhood association that protects the interest of the neighborhood, even as it gets pushed from every angle for development with development pressures.
Well, the one thing about it, at that particular time, it was all African Americans living in the area. Fantastic doctors, lawyers, ministers, everybody lived in the community. And so everybody looked after everybody, you knew everybody. Will that come back? I don't know. I would doubt it because people moved out. Now, in years to come, the way I'm watching the influx of people coming back into the city, I don't know about Jackson Ward going back to its roots.